Allora, anzitutto ringrazio Fabrizia e Marta per avermi aiutato, per aver collaborato con me alla creazione di questa giornata di studi sul gaming, Age of Gaming, perché siamo in una nuova era digitale, quindi anche la presentazione della cultura deve ovviamente passare per questi mezzi. Io non sono una gamer, quindi non ho esperienza, sono un'archeologa, però da archeologa sono interessata a creare queste nuove parti di cultura. Quindi oggi voleva essere anzitutto un momento di confronto tra addetti al lavoro, quindi per noi è importante che tutti abbiano accettato di registrare i loro interventi, siamo molto grati ai nostri relatori. So thank you to the speakers for accepting to record their presentations today, because that is very important for us. Appunto perché per poter poi anche divulgare quello che è il confronto che si svilupperà oggi. Io mi occupo di presentare, di parlare della prima sessione, ovvero quella che si occuperà dell'archaeogaming. Avremo una serie di case studies internazionali e in più una panoramica proprio sul panorama italiano dell'archaeogaming. Che cos'è l'archaeogaming? L'archeogaming non è solo lo studio dell'archeologia nei e dei videogiochi, chiaramente i casi più famosi sono Assassin's Creed, ma è anche una nicchia più piccola forse, che è l'uso dei videogiochi per scopi archeologici, ovvero per presentare il patrimonio culturale italiano, internazionale. È una sfida per gli archeologi e per gli operatori del settore culturali che si trovano ad affrontare dei linguaggi nuovi per comunicare il passato e a compiere spesso anche scelte di compromesso tra quel voler raccontare la realtà storica e le esigenze di gioco e perché no anche di marketing dei propri prodotti. Quindi è una sfida continua, serve parlare con più interlocutori. Io quello di cui sono anche molto contenta è che oggi abbiamo un workshop al femminile, tranne per per un intruso, Maurizio Amoroso, però tutto il resto è al femminile, quindi di questo sono molto contenta. Adesso lascerò lo spazio alla prima presentazione, but I would like to thank our speakers for coming from a long way, from the Adrian's Wall and from the Netherlands, but also from Italy, of course. And I will give now the floor first to Barbara BIRLEY and Marta ALBERTI. Faccio una breve presentazione. Barbara BIRLEY nasce come restauratrice ed è oggi curatrice presso il Vindolanda Trust, un'associazione non profit che dal 1970 si prende cura del forte romano di Vindolanda, lungo il Vallo di Adriano, attraverso iniziative di scavo, di musealizzazione e oggi anche di educazione digitale, attraverso progetti ben mirati e collaborazioni importanti. Di questo ci parlerà oggi Barbara insieme alla sua collega Marta ALBERTI, che è dottoranda dell'Università di Newcastle e a Vindolanda si occupa della direzione degli scavi nonché di numerosi progetti di ricerca. So I give the floor now to Barbara and Marta for their presentation. Thank you. Grazie.
Thank you for that, Aurora, and thank you for having me here. What I'm going to do over the next kind of maybe 20-30 minutes would be to talk to you about two case studies where we have used games on the site of Vindolanda. I have talked a number of times about these games in the past, and I would also like to say that our next speaker, Claire Stocks, has also worked very closely with these games as well. So we're kind of, even though she's not on the kind of title of the games, she was very much involved in what we were doing. But I'll start out because I assume not everyone in the room knows exactly where Vindolanda is because we are a long way from there. Right, so this is a map of Hadrian's Wall area. It is a section that the wall was actually built between the Tyne coast on the east and the Solway Firth on the west. Vindolanda actually dates to about 85 AD, and that's actually predates the building of Hadrian's Wall. We're there quite centrally located, as you can see, along a road that's called the Staingate. That's its medieval name. We don't know what the Romans actually called it, but it was the first frontier in the area, and it was to kind of pull back and isolate the frontier after the Romans were pushing up into what we now know as Scotland. The road became a really important area all the way up until almost the 1700s. We have information about this road system, so it was a very important road. The site itself continued to be occupied throughout the period of the building of Hadrian's Wall in about 122 and through the end of the Roman period in occupation. Post-Roman, we know that it probably went up until probably about the 8th century. So it's got a very long longevity on the site. We have active excavations. They have been running since around about 1970. We have a huge collection and a huge site that has been excavated. The interesting thing as well is, I will show you an aerial picture of the site in just a minute, but some areas we can go down to almost kind of 6 meters underneath the ground. It's quite a deep excavations. We have at least 14 different layers on the site. The earliest levels on the site are where we get the best preservation, and we get a number of organic objects that come from the site. For example, we have over 5,000 Roman boots and shoes, we have over 3,000 objects in wood, and we have probably the most famous would be the Vindolanda writing tablets, which are these thin sheets of wood that actually have written records of what happened on the site during those periods. This is what the site actually looks like in aerial. That was taken about a year ago in April of 2023. You'll see the playing card shape of the fort with all of its buildings on the inside and the extramural settlement just to the what is the top of the slide as you see it here. There's also kind of a snaky thing just on the side. That's actually the road, and you'll see that it's just to the north. If you were to extend this slide out a bit, a mile to the north, you'd find the actual curtain wall of Hadrian's Wall itself. Will be ongoing excavations this year. Marta will be out in the field, and we're taking in that green bit right there. So if you were to come to see us in the next 5 years, through April through to September, we'll be actually excavating, and you can come and see Marta. I'm usually in the museum, actually digging holes. So who are we? So I'm the curator. My job is to look after the collection, look after all of these objects that come out, but also, slightly unusually, because we're a small charitable trust, I also do all of the interpretation in the museum display and look after the education programs at the site. Now, Marta is the Deputy Director of Excavations, so she digs holes and also works on reporting what is being found, but works with a number of volunteers across the sites to actually do a lot of our work. So those excavations, that picture you saw just a few minutes ago, showed a number of people that were volunteering their time to come and have the experience of digging at Vindolanda. And so Marta is very much involved with that. And anything that we do at Vindolanda, because we're a small organization, we're always collaborating with our colleagues. And so Marta is one of the archaeologists that we collaborate with. We have 3 archaeologists that are full-time at the Vindolanda Trust. Right, moving over to games. So that's what is Vindolanda. So we have 2 games that we've created. And this is just kind of a little kind of family tree of how these games came together. First of all, we have The Missing Dead, which was a partnership project funded by the Arts Council England in the UK between Newcastle University, largely Clare, and some of our colleagues at the Games Lab and the Vindolanda Trust, myself, and working with our archaeologists. Now, this game was supposed to be launched in April of 2020, and if you'll remember, April of 2020 was right smack dab in the beginning of the pandemic. So things didn't go as planned, but there were always silver linings to the pandemic, and one of ours for this particular game was we were able to work with Creative Assembly. Now, Creative Assembly is part of the Sega Corporation and does a number of historically mostly correct, I would say, games. The one that relates to us would be Total War Rome. Of course, that was just re-released as well. And so they were interested in working with us through our games process. We worked with their legacy department, which is basically their education department, trying to encourage younger children, because most of their games are for older children and adults, but they want to encourage younger children to understand gaming, as well as to hopefully maybe someday want to grow up to be game designers, programmers, and all of the other things that they need. So part of what they were trying to do is trying to get people who are children who are interested in history involved in the creation of games. And then from that, we saw that, well, post-pandemic, this is all going really well. We like games. It's a great way to involve young people in our site. Why don't we try to do an online game instead of an app-based game like The Missing Dead? We again worked with the Newcastle University and Creative Assembly in order to do this. And now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about both those games. So The Missing Dead, this was a, as I said, an act-based murder mystery sort of game. It was narrative and you know, we wanted children to come on site, play the game and find out if they started as archaeologists and they found something, that then they could go through the story. Now, I will say, if it does bother anyone, there are some references to human remains in the next few slides, and so it's just as a trigger warning, so you know, and there also, it's about a child's death. So if anybody has any problems with that, please look away now. So basically, we wanted to make a game that was based for 7 to 11-year-olds, and based on a child's skeleton found at the site during 2010. And we were very careful that we wanted to populate it with real objects, buildings, people that we know of from the site, and that was really important to us. So that's why we wanted to work with the archaeologists. It is still available, I should say, on Google Play and the App Store. So if you did want to go and play it, you can do that. So this was the remains of the human burial that we had. We found this in a shallow grave in a barrack in dates to the 3rd and 4th century. This was really unusual because the Romans had very strict practices about what they did with the dead, and burying them inside a settlement is not something that they would do. So this was unusual for us, and we decided to use these remains as our kind of start point for our story, because we wanted to talk about possibly giving her a voice, which was interesting, but also we wanted to dispel the myths of you can't know everything about someone from the past. So what do we know? Well, we know that she was 8 to 11 years old, that there were no injuries or ill health on the remains. She was about 1.4 meters in height. She had, from her teeth, we did lead isotope analysis on her teeth, and we knew that she was, up until recently in her life, she was from the Mediterranean, and that from DNA evidence, we did know that she was female. So we could get that amount of information. But what we don't know, how the person died, who they were, or what killed them. And we thought that was a really good start for a murder mystery, those 3 things. And so we developed this idea that there was a missing slave girl, that she had disappeared, and that we were bringing in a tribune called Marcus in order to find out what happened. And so through the game, the child goes on a little kind of journey, the player goes on a journey across the site in order to understand this. But what I wanted to focus on now was how we use the evidence from the site in order to portray things. Children would probably never notice this, but that we wanted to make sure that we were accurate and correct. So the picture, the black and white picture behind me, is the first sort of drawing that the artist gave to us. You'll see at the very back, there's kind of a colonnaded temple, which is correct for what's on site. And you'll also notice that above every single door, there's a little plaque that has a Roman numeral on them. Now, we knew that they would have numbers on the doors because you needed to be able to access wherever those people were, the soldiers within those barrack rooms. There's a lot of barrack rooms, so that you could get the right information to the soldiers that you needed. But what we did was worked with the artist to say, no, 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 no. The temple would not be colonnaded as in the classical sort of sense of a Roman temple, because that's what we don't get on the frontier. It would have been a Romano-Celtic temple, sort of closed. So you can see that at the back of this picture. You'll also notice between the 2 images that the artist brought the perspective down, because children between the ages of 8 and 11, or 7 and 11, are shorter than we are as adults for the most part. So it was more like their perspective when they were looking at it. And then also, you'll notice that on the doors, they now have numbers on the doors. And this is direct evidence from the excavated remains on the site. We actually have door number 3 and door number 14, and they're actually on the panels of the doors, as you can see in the image. So we felt that that was really important. Now, it might not be important to everyone to know that that's the correct portrayal of how we see the doors, but for us, we felt that it was really important to get those details right. And I think a lot of big gaming companies don't always look at that sort of detail, and we can see that across the games that you can play. The next thing that we did was we actually tested it with some children, because as adults we have perceptions of what things will be like, and as children, I love working with children because they'll tell you exactly how they feel about something. There's kind of no sugarcoating it. One of the things that we hadn't thought about is, of course, it does get sunny in northern Britain on occasion. And of course, the day that we had the kids out to play the actual game, it was really sunny and they couldn't see. So we had to think about how we could change the interface in order to deal with sunlight. And then we found that, of course, they were having fun. We didn't want to read as much, that we needed to find ways to help with the user interface. And also our navigation tools, they weren't very good at map reading yet. And so how could we develop those tools to get them around the site easier? We added a few bits and pieces into the game in order to make this easier. First, just here at the corner, you can see a big hand, and that would kind of blink at them so that they knew that that's where they needed to click to get to the next bit. And then we also added Aquila, and he was a kind of guide, an animal spirit guide, if you will, that would take them around the site. And that was really popular with the children. Now, I mentioned that this was released, was supposed to be April of 2020. We got the Google sort of Android version out in November, and the App Store for the Apple out in December. So we did get them finished, but part of it was that our designers couldn't actually access the right computers, or all sorts of different things. And it was also supposed to be played on site. That's how we designed it, because we wanted people to come to the site. You couldn't actually access the site because it was closed. There were definite successes with this project, but there were also areas that we felt hadn't gone as well as we had expected. We did have the time to create these educational sources with Creative Assembly, and those were really important. So there's 4 educational packs. You can download them on our website, and they help to bring out parts of the story and the evidence base that we had. We talk about multiculturalism on the site. We talk about all sorts of different aspects, and then there's kind of a create and discover at the end of the actual set of work for the children to do. Those have been very popular, and we have had those downloaded a number of times. Unfortunately, because of the way the mechanisms work, I can't get up-to-date stats on how many people have downloaded these. So that was one of the things that we wanted to make sure was a bit different with the next game that we did. And we'll move on swiftly to that. It's case study 2, Vindolanda Adventure, and you can go on to vindolandaadventure.com and actually play this game. Now this is a different sort of idea. It's web-based, so it's not an app, and there was a couple of different reasons, and I'll explain those as we go through. So this was a partnership project between ourselves again, Newcastle University, and Creative Assembly. We wanted to get a little bit of money to see how we could work well with someone like Creative Assembly, being a charity, a university, and an industry business. There was a lot that we learned through that. And we all had very different sort of needs and wants out of the project. And it's helped to solidify where we go next, I think. First thing we did was we developed a narrative. And again, we were really working with that same 7 to 11-year-old children, because that's where they study the Romans on the national curriculum. But we wanted to provide them with a really solid story, something that they could understand and they could relate to. So we went with the birthday party invitation. So this is one of the writing tablets that I was talking about, and it's between 2 women. It's between Claudia Severa, and she's at the Fort of Briga. We don't know where that is, but somewhere close by. And she's writing to Sulpicia Lepidina, who is the commanding officer's wife at Vindolanda. And it dates between 103 and 105. And basically it says, "Come to my birthday to make my day more pleasant." And to me, that's something we would write in an email or a text message today, maybe not to make my day more pleasant, but come along, we'll have a few drinks and we'll have a good time. So it feels very human. And I felt that children all understand the idea of getting a birthday party invitation and wanting to go along to a party. So good solid start. And we started to develop the narrative after that. We decided to have two characters. We had Tagamas Vexillarius, and he's a standard bearer of the Vardulian cavalry. Now, we know that they were stationed on site a little bit after Lepidina, but still there on site, again, from another one of the writing tablets. And so we know quite a lot about him. And we worked with an artist. We went back to that kind of graphics novel sort of style and created Tagamas here, and we'll see Lepidina here in a few minutes. Getting a good quality artist to make sure that the scenic as well as the armor and dress that people are wearing is another place that I think that sometimes our big budget businesses can get it wrong. And we worked very closely with the archaeologists and with the artists in both projects to say, right, is this right? Is that right? And make sure that we were getting the imagery we wanted just right. But we were working with a master's student, and he was actually the one that developed the game. Now, he doesn't have a huge amount of skills and a big budget behind him, so we had to kind of shrink down our expectations a little bit on this project. But I think what he created was still very high quality. So we get little sprites. There's little Lepidina and there's little Tagamas, and very cute as they kind of wandered through their Roman scene. We did get some help from Creative Assembly in order to create the backdrop that looked appropriate for Vindolanda. And the idea, and the question started from, did Lepidina actually go to the birthday party? What if she went to the birthday party? What would she do? So basically, you have to go to the training grounds, which I have a picture of in just a minute, to find Tagamas's olives, because we have an amphora handle that says Tagamas on it, and it was apparently for olive stewed in wine. So we knew that that was a very popular thing for him to eat. Also that he didn't trust his fellow comrades because he had to write his name on it. And then complete the quiz to find Lepidina's slipper, which is another object that we were using. And then you can go to the dinner party at the end. Fairly simple, had little mini games mixed into it so the children would kind of go along with the dialogue. Very simple commands, arrow keys to go forward, arrow keys to go back. And then we tested it with a school group again, because we found that was successful with our last group. And so we felt that we'd take it into school, and there's Isaiah working with the children going, what do you like about this? What do you not like about this? We had another, I wouldn't say catastrophe, but issue with when we wanted to launch this game. So we had said that we wanted to launch on September 11th, because that's the date of the birthday party invitation. And in the UK, Queen Elizabeth died on September the 8th. And now this launched us into what was about 3 weeks of national mourning in the UK, which meant there was no sort of celebrations about anything. So a launch event would have been seen as really out of taste. So it went live. It was there from September 11th, and we also had to think about what else we could do. I also had the joy of project managing a partnership project where the two people that I was working with closely from the other two organizations both went on maternity leave at the same time in October. I'm looking at and so I suddenly had no support as well. So we had to think about what could we do that we could do earlier, that we could launch later and be okay with everything for the funders. So we did our first YouTube live premiere, which was a very interesting event. You can go along and see the YouTube, the YouTube is on the Vindolanda Trust channel, and it was about the making of the actual event. So that was our celebration of the actual the game. It did go very well. We had over 500 people, there on the day, which, for our first YouTube live, I felt that was pretty good. And they were able to watch how we made the game. This is some user stats. So we learned from the last game that we wanted to be able to have access to the user stats. Not surprising that the vast quantity of people who are using the game are from the UK, but I think it was really interesting to see the cross-section of where else people were viewing the game. So Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Australia, China, so it does have that breaking down of the geographic barriers that we had with the first game. And also, it wasn't just our local sort of areas. So Newcastle upon Tyne, Alnwick, those types of places, Hexham, are close to us, but we had people that were using it in London and in New York, all sorts of different places. So we were getting our message out much further than we did before. And just for the joy of it, this is the most popular bit. This is the training grounds, and this is where our little sprite of Tadmas has to go and practice his sword play. And as you can imagine, for children, as well as for adults, that this was actually really the popular bit. It's very simple. You just have to press the button to get the sword to swing. But it was really popular and shows that there is, dare I say, a gory or a kind of, not so nice sort of side to what people were wanting to play. So these are our take-home points, what we actually learned from these two case studies. Now they're going to come up in Italian, so I have to read them off of my page because my Italian is not very good. So my first take home is don't design a game to be released in a pandemic. That was not the best idea or one that is going to be launched during a major national political event. That didn't work out very well for us. But if you do, what can you turn it to your advantage? Our on-site versus off-site, extra educational material, the YouTube premiere, all of those types of things, we had to be flexible and we had to think about it and kind of help to work through things. Games that are designed for children can be played by adults. And I think we've all probably seen a cartoon that we took something that maybe children didn't take out of it because it's nuanced. And so I think wherever we go forward, we're going to have that in the back of our minds because we have a lot of adults that are enjoying and playing our games, even though they're based on children. There has to be a reciprocal relationship between the museums and heritage sites, the archaeologists, to work with gaming professionals, as well as with the industry. So that we need to work with our heritage sites and the archaeologists, as well as with the industry, in order to make sure that you have both quality and authenticity, so that you have that mix between the two. And I think that's really important. Make sure you test it with your audience. And if it's kids, make sure to test with kids because they will come out. One of our best ones was when we did the first game was about music, and children really wanted different types of music for the scenes that they were going into. And so we went back and we got that much better. And we hadn't realized as adults what difference that made. So that was really important. And the last one would be when looking at web versus app, apps will probably have a wider appeal, and especially with people who have phones, tablets, and such. But the web-based worked really well when we were working with the formal education market because that could go into a school kind of computer lab and they could play the game, and we were getting 30 hits, 40 hits as they were playing it, whereas you found that the apps are something that they would do on their own or with the family. So those were our take-home points, and I think that kind of covers everything about that I wanted to talk about today. I'm happy to take questions. I don't know if we're having it to where we can do questions as soon as we're finished with each speaker. Marta has said if you want to ask in Italian, she's happy to translate for me as well. Or if there was anything that was unclear, she will translate. Thank you very much. with both of these games, there was no monetary success with it. They were not seen as for profit, and that's something that we're looking for going forward. They were funded by agencies that basically were giving us trial sort of money, sort of experimental money. So we were just taking them as a learning experience. Where we go in the future, money would be a great thing. And that's something that we're looking at on our next steps. Success for us would be seeing children using them. So we're looking at numbers of users. We're not interested for these two games in actually any sort of other return. So within the first game, it would be how many were downloaded. So we're looking at downloads. Within the second game, we're looking at how many users, because they're different sort of analysis between the two. So yeah.
Dal punto di vista, noi siamo una medio-piccola realtà, nonostante l'importanza dei ritrovamenti archeologici, non siamo il British Museum, quindi non abbiamo bisogno di fare queste metriche in modo troppo accurato. Dobbiamo presentare ai nostri founder, ma noi siamo una realtà che si preoccupa principalmente della conservazione e dell'educazione, quindi per noi il successo è che i bambini che vengono sul sito la utilizzino, che le scuole la utilizzino, che le scuole dicano ok, abbiamo uno strumento educativo da utilizzare. Assolutamente, il problema è che ovviamente nel primo caso, che è stato quello di Missing Dead, siccome era a budget più alto, e come hai visto anche la graffa riflesso nella bellezza della grafica, il monitoring era con Creative Assembly, quindi noi non avevamo accesso invece ed è anche una cosa positiva dell'avere un website based, perché poi è molto più semplice, non devi entrare in ambiti in cui non sei familiare, vedi direttamente i dati basati sull'accesso, puoi anche usare Google Analytics, cioè a prova di... Quindi sì, direi nel futuro vedremo dove questo ci porta, ma per la realtà inglese è importante avere proprio di concetto, nel senso che noi siamo una piccola realtà, non abbiamo soldi da tirare fuori magicamente, ci servono soldi da realtà come Creative Assembly, come Arts Council England, Fondazione Cariplo, NHLF, le grandi fondazioni che danno tanto budget, però per ottenere quel budget devi avere una prova che qualcosa ha funzionato.
So we found that the funders, they have, in the UK, there's a digital sort of headline, much like engagement with children and youth people, so they'll have like these funding streams, and digital is huge. And so for our funders, it ticked a box to do games. It also ticked, that's part of the reason for, children, it ticks a box. And so I don't think we ever had a problem with the idea of games. I'm looking at Claire and I'm thinking both the funders were quite good. The Arts Council that funded the first project has much more rigid parameters that you have to work in, whereas the Art Fund, different funder, is really about experimental work. And we also applied for money that was just out of COVID. It was funded because it was different, and it was a little bit something they hadn't seen before, I think. And that was also the use of a student to create the game. So we were giving him real life experience. And so I think they liked that as well, because it was also about, giving a young person that leg up on their journey. So the game was just a mechanism. And so it wasn't, although we were creating a game, I don't think that the funders either time went, no, we're not going to do that, because there's that underlying education side to it. Yeah.
Fondamentalmente la cosa importante è quando approcci una entità che ti dia fondi, è che quell'entità abbia un pacchetto che si concentra sul digitale, e quindi noi abbiamo chiesto nel pacchetto giusto, quindi non so, in Italia è un po' diverso immagino. Ci sono dei pacchetti e tu devi chiedere sotto la cosina giusta, sotto la... She's saying in Italy it's quite different. Digital is not video game, and if it is a video game then it has to be a big brand, big box. Barbara diceva che una invece degli output importanti che i nostri fornitori, i nostri funders cercavano era l'educazione e poi il fatto che abbiamo impiegato un giovane studente di masters, quindi una persona come quelle che studiano in questo collegio, avendolo affiancata a dei professionisti del settore, avendogli dato una possibilità, quindi per loro era anche, diciamo, professional development per questo ragazzo che per essere un ragazzo esatto. Aurora has a question.
My question is very simple, out of curiosity. You said that you were planning where next. Can you already answer this question? Will you continue with the gaming?
Yes, we will. We will definitely. Claire's shaking her head as well. We have big ideas. Yeah, and I think we've tested the waters. I've proved to my trustees, the people that are running the trust, that this is a good way to go. And so it's now, what do we do next? And then finding the money to do that. So yeah, right.